Hi, I'm back to finish reading this chapter of the Land of Stories. We are still on chapter 19, and I'll read you part 2 now. The path split in two different directions, and there was a large silver fork stuck in the ground. "Which way do we go?" Connor asked. "I don't know," Alex said. "We might have to ask for directions." "But you said to not trust anyone here," Peter said. "I know, but we don't have much of a choice now," Alex said. "We'll take the path to the right and ask the first person, plant, or animal we see." They followed the path to the right and traveled out of the woods, and they found themselves entering a forest of another kind. There were mushrooms everywhere they looked. They varied from size of normal mushrooms to the size of houses. There were polka dot mushrooms, plaid mushrooms, rainbow mushrooms, and mushrooms of every pattern and color imaginable. "This place is nuts," Connor said. An odor filled the air as they continued into the mushroom forest. "I recognize that smell," Mother Goose said. "It reminds me of Morocco." They figured someone must have been causing it, so they followed the scent off the path. Eventually, they found the source of the smell, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. In the middle of the fungal forest, they found an enormous caterpillar lounging on top of a mushroom and smoking from a hookah. He was blue with dark spots and was very obese, even for caterpillar standards. His antennae were wrapped around his head like a turban. The caterpillar's eyes were glazed over as if he were half asleep, and he blew smoke rings into the air. "Excuse me, Mr. Caterpillar," Alex said, approaching his mushroom. "I hope we're not bothering you, but would you kindly point us in the direction of the Castle of Hearts?" "Who are you?" he asked the group in a drowsy voice. "My name is Alex, and this is my brother Connor, and we're our friends Mother Goose, Lester, Mr. Woodman, and Peter." "What are you?" the caterpillar asked. "Well, we're all different," she said. "I'm a girl, those two are boys, she's an old woman, that's a goose, and he's a man of metal." The caterpillar giggled. "Different, but the same." "Huh?" "Different, but the same," he repeated, but found it just as funny the second time. "Or so it appears." Alex turned back to the others, but none of them had any clue what he was talking about. "I'm afraid I don't understand," she said. "Lost," he stated. "Was that a question?" Alex asked. "A question to you, 'tis a fact to me," the caterpillar said. Alex was so confused she shook her head. The others felt their sanity slipping from their brains just by being in the proximity to the caterpillar. "This is going great," Connor said with a massive eye roll. "This worm is clearly insane. Let's find someone who can actually help us." "Let me handle this one, kids," Mother Goose said. "He's not crazy. The hookah is just making his brain sleepy. I might understand him if I get on his level." Mother Goose walked up to the caterpillar and had a bouncy seat on the mushroom beside him. "May I?" she asked and gestured to the hookah. The caterpillar passed it to her and Mother Goose smoked it. After a few moments, her eyes became as glossy as his, and she also spoke in complete nonsense. "Who are you?" Mother Goose asked the caterpillar. "What am I?" he said. "Where are you?" she said. "Here with you," the caterpillar said. "And if this were the Castle of Hearts?" Mother Goose asked. "We'd be there," he said. "But where?" she asked. "In the castle," he said. "Ah, so there would be here," she said, and they nodded together. "Here would be what's left," the caterpillar nodded. "And am I what's left?" she asked. "You're what's right, of course. But what's right is wrong, and what's left is right." "I understand completely," Mother Goose said. "Thank you so much, Mr. Caterpillar." The others stared at them, absolutely dumbfounded. Mother Goose hopped down from the mushroom and moseyed back to them. The caterpillar said to go back to the fork and take the left, he said. He did? Alex asked. "It's all about the keywords," Mother Goose said. "I used to be friends with the Sultan who enjoyed the hookah too. Lester, I'm going to need you to carry me the rest of the way. I am awfully tired." They left the mushroom forest and returned to the fork in the path and traveled left instead of right. They followed the path through Wonderland until they came to a sign that read Castle of Hearts and pointed to the road that went up a very steep hill. An enormous structure was perched on the top of the hill. The windows were shaped like hearts, and the flags flying from the towers bore hearts too. "That's it," Alex said. "It's the Queen of Hearts castle." They ran up the hill to the castle and found themselves in the Queen's gardens. There were rose bushes throughout the garden. Most of the roses were red, others were white, and then there were some that looked like a mix of the two. Upon further inspection, the twins realized that all the red flowers had been painted. It was only then that they noticed that the garden was littered with brushes and paint cans. It was as if the project had come to an abrupt stop, and the twins were pretty sure they knew why. "Let's get inside the castle," Alex said. "Maybe the Queen of Hearts and her card soldiers will still be there." They walked across the drawbridge and entered the Castle of Hearts. Much to the Tin Woodman's delight, there were hearts everywhere. The rugs were covered in hearts, the wallpaper was hearts, and all the art was hearts. Even the doors and arches through the castle were shaped like hearts. "Gosh, it's like Valentine's Day threw up in here," Connor said. Despite the decor, they found the castle very disheartening. Just like the Wicked Witch's castle, they didn't find a single soul. "No one's here," Alex said, and tears came to her eyes. "We're too late again. Uncle Lloyd has already taken everyone. We'll never catch up to him." "Yes, we will," Connor said. "Even if we have to travel into every book that's ever written, we'll find him and stop his army." "Everyone keep your eyes open for a book. He could have stashed it anywhere." They searched every corner of the castle but came up empty-handed. They walked down a long corridor and through a pair of enormous heart-shaped double doors. The room behind the doors was massive and square. There was a giant throne at one end of the room and a large platform in the center with a heart-shaped axe resting on top of it. Above them, the room was lined with rows and rows of benches. It was big enough to seat thousands of people. "What is this place, a stadium?" Connor asked. "It's a courtroom," Alex said. "This must be where the queen has people beheaded." Alex walked closer to the throne. She accidentally kicked something. A flat object slid across the floor. She looked down and saw it was a book. It was covered in a blue jacket with the title, "A Treasury of Fairy Tales." "I found it," Alex called to the others. "It's the treasury Red was talking about. Connor, they've returned to the fairy tale world already." The twins felt sick to their stomachs. Their uncle had succeeded. He had formed an army of literary villains that he had been dreaming about since he was a child, and now he was leading it into the fairy tale world to destroy it. "Okay, we've got to get back as soon as possible," Connor said. "They must have just entered the fairy tale world. They couldn't have gotten that far. We'll regroup with Jack, Goldilocks, and Red and go straight to the Fairy Council. We'll show them Peter and the Tin Woodsman. They'll have to believe us. We'll round up the armies of the kingdoms together and we'll take our uncle down." Alex opened the Treasury of Fairy Tales and a bright beam of light shined up from its pages. "We'll save time if we split up," Alex said. "Mother Goose and I will go to the Fairy Council and show them the Tin Woodman and Peter. Connor, you travel back into Neverland and Oz and gather up the others. Travel back to the cave and start warning the kingdoms of what's to come." Everyone nodded. It was the best plan they could make given the time and the circumstances. Connor retrieved their copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland from Lester's saddle. "Alex, be careful," Connor said and gave her a hug. "You too," she said. Alex, Mother Goose, and Lester quickly traveled into the beam of light and disappeared from the Castle of Hearts. Connor opened Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. However, just as he was about to step back into Neverland, a winged creature swooped through the courtroom and stole the book. "What the heck?" Connor said. The creature vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Connor looked around the courtroom but didn't see anything. The creature reappeared a moment later and stole the treasury just as the Tin Woodman and Peter were about to follow Mother Goose and Alex. A sinister laugh echoed through the courtroom, but it didn't come from any of them. "What's happening?" Peter asked. Connor felt like his heart was beating out of his chest. "We're not alone." He was just as terrified to say it as they were to hear it. A thump echoed in the courtyard. Just like condensation evaporating from a window, a shield of invisibility disappeared from thousands and thousands of figures that had been inside the courtroom the entire time. Lloyd and his villain army hadn't traveled into the fairy tale world after all. They were here. "Well, well, well," Lloyd said. "It looks like my brave little niece and nephew have come all this way for nothing." Connor's uncle appeared by the throne. He was standing with Captain Hook, the Queen of Hearts, and the Wicked Witch of the West. Captain Hook was a tall man with long, dark, curly hair. He wore a long black hat and a heavy coat with massive shoulders. Notoriously, his right hand was missing and had been replaced by a sharp metal hook. The Queen of Hearts was a hideous woman. She had an abnormally large head with wide mouth and her face unpleasantly flushed at all times. She wore a golden crown and a large, unflattering gown with mismatched pattern of hearts. Her scepter and all her jewelry were hearts as well. The Wicked Witch of the West was short and feisty. She had one large visible eye and another that was covered with an eye patch. She had 3 braids of thin hair and wore a pointed golden hat that allowed her to control the flying monkeys. She held a magical umbrella and used it as a cane as she walked. The seats above them were filled with their infamous subordinates who cheered for their respective commanders. There were thousands of men and women in yellow armor that made up the Winky Army. They stared off into space as if the Wicked Witch had brainwashed them. The witches, wolves, crows, bees, and flying monkeys stood and flew among them. There were hundreds of pirates. They were all monstrous and ragged-looking men. Hook's infamous sidekick, Mr. Smee, was among them. He was an awkward, fat, and balding man with a gray beard and striped blue pants. The Queen of Hearts playing card soldiers were stationed throughout the courtroom as well. They each were 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide. They bore numbers and symbols of hearts, clubs, spades, and diamonds. The White Rabbit was among them and was so terrified by the creatures around him he covered his eyes with his ears. All of the children in the other world combined their nightmares, and they would be where Connor was standing right now. The Wicked Witch tapped her umbrella on the floor, creating the thump that they had heard earlier, and the flying monkey landed at Lloyd's side. The monkey handed him the copies of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and the Treasury of Fairy Tales. "You made a big mistake," Connor said to his uncle. "As soon as Alex realizes you haven't entered the fairy tale world yet, she'll know something is wrong. She'll come back with the fairies." Lloyd laughed. "Sadly, Alex will never return from the place I sent her." He peeled the treasury jacket off the book, and Connor saw that the two did not belong together. Alex had been tricked into another story. "Where did you send her?" he yelled. "It doesn't matter anymore," Lloyd said. "What matters now is where I'm sending the rest of you." "I say, off with their heads!" the Queen of Hearts shouted. "I told you, Your Majesty, you can chop off as many heads as you want once we conquer the fairy tale world," Lloyd said. "I have something even better planned for these 3. Lloyd nodded to the Wicked Witch, and she tapped her umbrella again. 6 flying monkeys swooped down and grabbed Connor, the Tin Woodman, and Peter by their arms. They flew them high into the air, and the entire villain army roared with delight. Connor's uncle removed another book and a blue potion bottle from his lapel pocket. He placed the book on the platform in the center of the courtroom and poured the potion onto it. A beam of light shined straight out of the book and toward the ceiling. "You'll never get away with this," Connor said. "But I already have," said Lloyd with a menacing smile. "Throw them in." "No!" Connor yelled. The flying monkeys threw Connor, the Tin Woodsman, Peter into the beam, and they vanished from the Castle of Hearts. The villain army erupted in applause. Lloyd stacked the book he had tricked Alex into and the book he threw Connor into on top of their copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. He gave the Wicked Witch another nod. A fiery geyser blasted from the tip of her umbrella, and she burned the books until they were nothing but a pile of ashes. This outraged Captain Hook, and he hooked Lloyd by the collar. "You said I would be the one to kill Peter Pan," he yelled in his face. "That was our agreement." "James, relax," Lloyd said. "I simply put him in a place he can't escape from for the time being. Once you and your men have successfully aided me in conquering my home, I will retrieve the boy for you." Captain Hook released him from his hook, and Lloyd patted him on the shoulder. Hook wasn't convinced Lloyd would keep his word, but only time would tell. Lloyd stood on top of the platform and addressed the entire army. "The time has come," he shouted. "Now that the children are gone, there will be nothing to protect the kingdoms of my homeworld. We will return to the ship and set sail at once. Together we will conquer the fairy tale world and destroy anything that stands in our way." The villains roared in favor. Lloyd looked proudly over the army he had formed. His whole life had led up to this very moment. The boy whose power had been stripped away from him was now standing as the most powerful man in the universe. He had accomplished an impossible, or what he had accomplished was impossible, and nothing was going to stop him now. "But first," Lloyd said, "to ensure victory, there is another story I'm interested in recruiting from. We just have one more stop to make." All right, that is the end of our chapter. The next chapter is called The Storybook Grill, and I will see you guys later. Bye.